Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today, on Sue's Healthy Minutes, I want to share perhaps a more spiritual message, but also a very practical one. Over the past few weeks, the Lord has really been speaking to me about not only listening to and hearing the word of the Lord, but also obeying it. I even shared a message in church a few weeks ago on the very topic, and our pastor for the past few Sundays has also been speaking on hearing the voice of God. So I'm pretty sure the Lord is trying to get my attention. Our pastor pointed out the unique differences in the Hebrew words logos and rhema, both often translated word in the scriptures. Logos is the word used for the general, overall word of God, while rhema is the word of God spoken directly or personally to us. Perhaps many of us have experienced times when God uses a particular verse or promise in the Bible as an answer to a prayer lifted up or to speak directly to any given situation or decision we are facing. I know He has for me, and these are promises we can claim as our own. Our pastor also pointed out that God can use particular verses even taken out of the context of their original application, and use them to speak to us. As he said these words, I was reminded of a time many years ago when the Lord did just that. It was one of the first times God spoke to me in this way. So today I want to share this story with you. It happened many years ago when I was just a young mom with my very first child, Ashley. I had quit my full-time job to be a stay-at-home mom. I loved being a mom, but also my newfound freedom of time to join in various daytime ladies' activities at church and beyond. When Ashley was just a few months old, I decided I needed some sort of organized exercise routine to lose the last 5 or so pounds left over from my pregnancy. The ever-popular aerobic dance classes of the 80s offered at the local Y seemed to be a perfect fit for me. The classes were held 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which left Tuesdays open for me to join the ladies' prayer group meeting at church. I loved to dance, and I seemed to have a knack for picking up the routines taught in the aerobic dancing class. It wasn't long before the teacher of the class noticed my rhythm and ability and asked me on several occasions to sub for her when she needed to miss class. When the 10-week class was over, the Y offered me a job. The next thing I knew, I was teaching 3 one-hour exercise classes 3 days a week. And for some unknown reason to me to this day, I felt I needed to do more to stay in shape. With Ashley being cared for in the nursery provided by the Y each Monday, Wednesday, Friday after teaching, I would go out for a run, gradually building up to about 5 to 6 miles with each run, all the while nursing my baby and being a full-time mom and homekeeper and an active member at my church. This went on for several months and even into a year. I soon found myself becoming extremely exhausted. I will never forget the day I cried out for prayer at church. It was our weekly ladies' meeting. I shared with the group how exhausted I was and even all the things I was doing. One well-meaning friend immediately said, "You need to quit nursing your baby. That is what is taking so much energy from you." I was a little confused by this advice, to say the least, and as the ladies circled around me and began to pray, a verse from the Bible popped into my head. Now, it wasn't the words of the verse, just the address, as so they call it. Ezekiel 5:3. That was it. Ezekiel 5:3. I was not at all familiar with this verse, and I had no idea what the verse said. I honestly even doubted that it was the Lord that spoke this to me as we prayed. I really wondered if I had just made it up. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before. So for the next few days, I did not even look the verse up to see what it said. Finally, my curiosity won out, and I looked it up, and I read these words. Also, take some of them and bind them in the edge of your robe. As I read the words, I was more confused and convinced than ever that I had made this whole thing up. But over the next few days, I could not get the words out of my mind. I decided to take a second look, and this time read the context of the verse. And though the reason God spoke these words to Ezekiel were quite different than the reason he spoke them to me, as I read the surrounding verses, I knew exactly what God was saying to me. Ezekiel 5, verses 1-3 says this, "And you, Ezekiel, son of man, take a sharp sword and use it as a barber's razor and shave your head and your beard. Then take scales for weighing and divide the hair into 3 parts. You shall burn 1/3 with fire in the center of the city when the days of the siege are completed. Then you shall take 1/3 and strike it with the sword all around the city, and 1/3 you shall scatter to the wind, and I will unsheath a sword behind them." And then verse 3, the verse he gave me, "Also take some of them and bind them in the edges of your robe." That day, what God was trying to speak to me became perfectly clear. God was telling me to take a sharp sword, razor, to my activities and weigh them on a scale, so to speak, and consider what I was allowing to consume my time and energy. As I prayerfully considered all the busyness in my life, I was to allow the Word of God to be my razor. As I cut away and weighed them in God's scale, I would need the fire of God to purify some, and to others he would prune. But the others I was to throw to the wind. I was to let them go and never look back. And in fact, God would come behind me and make sure they were cut off. These were robbing me of both my time and energy. But most importantly, there were some, like being a wife and a nursing mother and a woman of God, that I was to hold on to so closely, to bind them in the edges of my robe, so as to not let anyone or anything take them from me. These activities were precious to God and would be used for His glory to produce fruit that would last. In verse 4, the Lord goes on to say that even some of these He would refine with fire, and that the fire from them would spread to all the house of Israel, God's people. I cannot begin to tell you what a life-changing rhema word this was for me. I sought the Lord for direction and began to whittle away at all the activities that were just busyness and not for me. The Lord spoke this word to me long before real bread came into our lives. But several years after starting on this bread journey, the Lord spoke a similar word to me through the Proverbs 31 woman. I often share it when I speak and teach. For years since discovering real bread and milling grain, it continues to excite me when I find bread verses in my daily Bible reading, and Proverbs 31:27 was no exception, although a very different sort of bread verse. It reads, "She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness." I remember as a young mother of then 6 children, I laughed to myself when I read this verse about bread. There was certainly nothing idle about my life. But a closer look led me back to the same word God had spoken to me so many years before. The Hebrew word for looks well here means literally to lean forward and to peer into the distance. The word ways means walks or steps or our activities. Household means just that, her family. But the root word means to build. What I gleaned from this verse is that this wise woman builds her house by leaning forward and peering into the distance and considering what lasting effects today's activities and choices may have on her future and the future of her family. She considers both blessings and consequences. But what does it actually mean to not eat the bread of idleness? The word bread here literally means food or the grain for making it, but idleness means to lean idle, having no significant use or value. It actually comes from a root word meaning to burn or to shine, but in the sense of only apparent or burned out. As I read this meaning, it caused me to think of the times when we hear someone or even ourselves say, I'm just burned out. We allow ourselves to get too busy with things that have no significant use or value. And these can often masquerade as any worthwhile cause. If we are not careful, we soon find ourselves burned out because much of what we are doing is an activity or a burden God never intended us to carry. Now, don't misunderstand. There are times in our life where busyness is necessary to accomplish a special task at hand, often leaving us exhausted. But I have found that God gives us an extra measure of strength to complete these tasks, often followed by some time to rest. But we should not be living day to day like this. If we are, we often find ourselves say we don't have time for something that perhaps God really wants us to do, or that would greatly benefit ourselves and or our families. I often hear people share that they do not have time to mill their own grain or make their own bread. It is something they want to do, but feel overwhelmed by adding just one more thing to their plate. And honestly, this breaks my heart. It is so easy to get busy in this world we live in. I know I often get sucked in as well. And I share this word with you today, not to guilt trip anyone. We already put enough guilt on ourselves. Instead, I simply want to encourage you to stop for a moment and breathe and consider your ways, your activities. It is important to realize that the foods we eat today can affect our life and the life of our family in the future. Heart disease doesn't start the day you have a first heart attack. Cancer doesn't begin the day you get your biopsy back. And statistics show that 70% of school-age children have at least one heart disease risk by the time they are 12 years old, and that 2/3 of school-age children have high cholesterol. What is that going to mean for them as an adult? Dr. Katz, the former head of preventative medicine at Yale University, once made this alarming statement. More children are harmed by poor diet than by drugs, alcohol, and tobacco combined. We simply cannot afford to eat the bread of idleness. God has given us one of the most nutrient-dense and delicious foods to perfectly nourish our bodies, real bread. Making room for a few simple changes in your diet and lifestyle, like adding real bread made from freshly milled whole grains, might make a huge difference, not only in your immediate health, but your future health as well. When people ask me, how do I find the time to mill my flour and to make my bread? I have to simply answer, I make the time. And it has been one of the most life-changing lifestyle choices I have ever made. That is why sharing It's the Bread stories is so encouraging to me and hopefully to you. I love hearing how real bread has changed your life. I want to encourage you today to stop and consider the activities in your life. Are there activities in your life that you need to throw to the wind to make time for the ones you need to fold into the edge of your robe and hang on to? Activities that could greatly change the life and health of you and your family. I hope this message today helps someone that is perhaps feeling as overwhelmed and as exhausted as I was when I simply cried out to the Lord and He showed me the way so many years ago. I love the words of Jesus in Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavily burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Thank you for listening today. Be blessed today and every day with all the goodness of the Lord. Until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.